We get a whole bunch of silly bald jokes here, and then eventually Steve is moved to share. He says he's been hiding his condition, and they're all like, say it, say it. And then Steve goes,
my baldness.
The way David Garrison said it, I think it's the funniest thing that David Garrison has done on this show so far. Welcome back to another episode of The Rank. I'm John, and today we're going to be ranking the next episode of Married with Children. Now, for those of you who are new to the show, I'm just going to give you a quick agenda here. We start with the potent notables, which are just a couple interesting facts or tidbits that I found out about the episode or series. Then I do the episode overview, which is where I talk about everything that happened in the episode, so spoiler alert. And then I do the rank, where I rank the episode in 5 categories on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best, all to find out what are the best sitcoms of all time. And today we're going to be ranking the 7th episode of the 3rd season, titled The Bald and the Beautiful, written by Jules Dennis and Richard Mueller and directed by John, crazy last name. It's Sulia.
I kind of butchered it, but whatever.
However you say that, that's who directed. But let's find out how this one stacked up, starting with the potent notables.
Potent notables.
So this episode aired Sunday, January 29th, 1989. Married with Children is continuing its strong showing, getting a 10.4 rating this week, which is up 0.1 from last week. It's still beating its competition on ABC and is still also the highest rated show on Fox. And for the other potent notable, I've got one that's sort of general for the series. So originally the show was pitched for Sam Kinison as Al and Roseanne Barr as Peggy. However, both Kinison's and Barr's managers told the creators and producers that Roseanne and Kinison were both looking for movies. They didn't want TV. Seems like it went well for them. Don't you remember all the great movies with Roseanne Barr and Sam Kinison?
Sarcasm?
Although I will say Roseanne did get her own sitcom that was basically this again, and it did pretty well. Well, those are the potent notables. Let's go to the episode overview. We open the episode with a shockingly unfamiliar sight. Peggy and Al post-coital. Naturally, Peggy is pumping Al up, but Al is miserable anyway, because he just had to do this as like a chore. But Peggy's like, I really, really believe if you just practiced once in a while, you would get good at sex. Al, who's still miserable, asks, why did he ever agree to this Tuesday night sex thing? But then he turns on the TV and we hear it's the end of Monday Night Football. So now Al is upset. He intimates that Peg tricked him into thinking it was Tuesday so that she could get laid, and she actually looks sheepish. But in her defense, she just wanted it to be close to Al's shower day, which is equal parts hilarious and understandable. Now, this is not the plot of the episode. The plot is coming with the knock on the Bundy's door after Peggy goes upstairs. Who is it? I mean, it's either going to be Marcy or Steve, right? This time, it's Steve. And how does Al answer the door? Steve, I just had sex. What do you want? Last episode, he opened the door with, I need a bra. And now anyway. I mean, can you imagine going over to a neighbor's house and that's how they answer the door for you? I actually think that would be awesome. I kind of want to do that now, except that in reality, not in sitcom or movie world, I've never had neighbors pop over. So is that because I'm antisocial and weird?
Probably.
Or is that just the norm? I'm curious. Let me know. But Steve's going to introduce us to the plot of the episode because he's all bent out of shape that someone has left him a coupon for tuna on his desk. No, wait, flip it over. It was an ad for hair loss medication. Someone thinks he's going so bald that they're going to anonymously leave an ad for that on his desk. So Steve is legit freaking out, and he points out to Al that, hey, you're losing your hair too. But Al just doesn't give a shit. And it ends up being a running joke throughout the episode that Steve's hair loss is worse than Al's, which is really goofy to anyone who's not blind. But Steve is shocked at how cavalier Al's being about his hair loss. I mean, if their hair falls out, their wives won't find them attractive anymore. Then Al hilariously says, there you go, Steve. Way to look at the bright side. Oh, this show. But Steve actually likes his wife, and he worries that if she leaves him, who'll have him? On that note, we fade to black and we cut to the next scene. We're at Al's work in his shoe store as he senses that beautiful women have walked into the store. He's got his back to them, but his face brightens, and he says he feels a morning breeze. And one of these women is going to say to him, didn't you used to play for the Chicago Bears? Naturally, Al says yes. And she's being all nice and flirty with him and telling him how handsome he is. But we find out, because she talks to her friend loud enough for everyone in the mall to hear, that she was just talking shit because she pities balding men. And after they leave, Steve comes in and was like, I wasn't able to get that medication because you need a prescription for it, but I did get Dr. Fur. He wants to show Al, but first he just can't help but remark about the two women he just talked to that mistook him for a football player, which was a cute little callback. But he goes to put this stuff on his hair, and I was like, that smells like dog food. And Steve's like, hey, if it helped me keep my hair, I would put your socks on my head, Al. What is going on with Al's feet? There's a consistent joke throughout the entire series about how smelly his socks are. Anyway, when Steve then offers the product to Al, Al declines until he sees those two women walk by and they've got this younger looking guy with a full head of hair and sort of hanging all over him. But when Al sees that, he decides to go for it. Next thing we know, Al is asleep on the couch and Buck is licking his head, because the hair loss stuff smells like dog food. But then Al's gonna get up and he's gonna go upstairs and the dog's just following him everywhere. But as soon as he's upstairs, Marcy comes over. She's worried about Steve. He wore a sombrero while they had sex last night. He's also been insisting on having sex with the lights off. So Marcy's like, is he cheating on me? What's going on? And Peggy's like, don't worry about it. But Marcy's like, no, something's definitely off because we usually go to an art house movie on Monday nights. And instead of doing that, this last Monday, he took me to an Elmer Fudd retrospective and kept repeating, isn't he sexy? She just knows there's something weighing on Steve's mind. And Peggy's like, well, what are you supposed to do about it? Care? And then she just cackles. I really enjoyed this bit here. She's like, hey, let his mother fix it. She's the one who broke him. And for whatever reason, this seems to satisfy Marcy as they leave to go shopping. And right as they leave, it's just in time for Steve to come walking through the sliding door in the backyard. He's got bad news. The Dr. Fur hair loss stuff, it got recalled because they found that it was 100% dog food. But don't worry, he's got a substitute. It's called Instahair, and he got it from a doctor at the bar. But the doctor had to do a test to make sure that Steve was a candidate for, so naturally, Steve is going to do this same test to Al. What's the test? Well, he lights a match, puts it out, and then puts the burnt match onto the back of Al's head. So Al, in pain and pissed off, goes and grabs a bat and it's like, I got a test for you too. But the point is that if you feel pain, then your follicles are still working, which means he's a candidate for Instahair. So Steve gives him the bottle and says, bottoms up, Al, and Al starts to drink it. Anyway, luckily Al doesn't go blind, and they both put it in their hair and start rubbing. Now, it's while they're both sitting on the couch and rubbing their scalps that we get to see Kelly and Bud for the first time. The reactions to seeing their father and their neighbor sitting on the couch, scratching their heads like they have lice, is pretty funny. But then Bud is going to ask what they're doing, and Al just says, growing hair, Bud. Just a fun bit. Unfortunately for Bud, though, Steve is going to convince him that he's likely to lose his hair as well because it's hereditary. Feels kind of mean, Steve. But Bud is going to end up joining them on the couch, rubbing his scalp just as vigorously. And in the next scene, it's clear that Instahair has not worked, as Peggy tells Kelly, who's on the couch combing Buck's fur, by the way, that she's sorry she didn't make her breakfast, but she was busy prying the pillow that was stuck to Al's head. And when Bud comes downstairs, we learn that Kelly has continued to razz him, of course, by painting Bud's face onto Al's bowling ball. But she ends up using Buck's fur to punk him. She pretends like Bud's hair fell out in her hand, which is, actually Buck's fur, and Bud goes running upstairs screaming, basically. Now, this was kind of par for the course for the whole sibling thing that they've been having them doing for 3 seasons. But the part that I actually enjoyed was when Kelly asks Peggy if she minds that she's messing with Bud. And Peggy's like, of course not. That's why we had him. Okay. So Steve's going to come back over and commiserate with Al that the hair growth isn't working. And it's time to basically just give up. So Steve sets up a meeting of B.A.D, bald American dudes, at Al's shoe store. And the whole bit here is basically just that it's a bunch of balder guys than Al and Steve. This group brings Steve and Al into the meeting in blindfolds for some reason. And right as soon as they take them off and Al sees them, he says, can I put the blindfold back on? Can always count on Al. We get a whole bunch of silly ball jokes here, and then eventually Steve is moved to share. He says he's been hiding his condition, and they're all like, say it, say it. And then Steve goes,
My baldness.
The way David Garrison said it, I think it's the funniest thing that David Garrison has done on this show so far. So then they ask, Brother Al, have you been moved to share some words? And he's like, yeah, I'll share some words. You guys are nuts. And it also made him realize 2 things. 1, that he'd like to play pool again, which is a good joke. And 2, that these guys are way balder than him and Steve. And on that note, Al's gone. That's not the end of the episode, though. We get to have a nice little closure moment between Steve and Marcy. She shows up at the shoe store and she's like, Steve, what's going on? Steve's like, I've got something terrible to tell you. Going bald. And Marcy's like, yeah? So clearly she didn't care at all. And so he's like, so you're still attracted to me? And she's like, of course, who wouldn't be? He's like, well, obviously somebody wouldn't be, because who would leave this on my desk? And Marcy's like, yeah, I put that on your desk. And Steve's like, why? And she's like, well, it's your turn to do the grocery shopping, and tuna 3 for $1.49 is a really great deal. I just thought that was a great callback joke, and I felt like it was actually atypical of the show. I really enjoyed it, but this is how the episode ends, so let's see how it ranked.
A rank.
So the rank is where I rank the episode based on 5 categories: story, acting, dialogue, episode coherence, and character relatability. I rank it on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best, and then I have a laugh counter where I tally up the amount of times the episode made me laugh out loud. 1 point per laugh out loud gets added to the score. But before I dive in here, I just want to say if you're enjoying this episode, please leave a like down below. It really does help me out. But without further ado, the first category is story. And the story is that Steve is worried about losing his hair and ends up getting Al sucked into it as well. Look, it's not the greatest story, but for Married with Children, it's a decent story. It kind of made Peg and Marcy take a sort of back seat though, but it was still decent, so I gave it a 3.25. So that brings us to acting. David Faustino wasn't in it much, but I thought he did good in this one. The main cast were honestly great. Even the guest stars, which typically have not been that great in this series, were pretty good. Both the old men at the bald club and the hot ladies who pitied balding men at the beginning. I decided to go 4.5. So that brings us to dialogue, and I thought the dialogue was excellent in this one. It had plenty of the staple Married with Children jokes, but it actually had a lot of more subtle comedic moments as well. I think this is the best scripted show as far as jokes are concerned that I've seen so far this season with Married with Children. There were a couple of misses, but overall, even if it didn't get me to laugh out loud, I still enjoyed the joke, so I gave it a 4.75. So that brings us to episode coherence. I think this episode is really only hurt in coherence by the way that the other characters, besides Steve and Al, are essentially just servicing their story. It's not a big deal because it's bound to happen, but it does drop it just that little bit off of perfect. Also, it's a little odd that Al only cares about his hairline when 2 young, hot women remark about it. Now, I get that being a motivation for most men, but I don't know that I fully buy that Al would care about that. I'm not saying I don't buy it, I'm just not all the way there for that, because he seems to not care about sex that much, but he does like women that aren't his wives. But then he also won't cheat on his wife. I don't know. Anyway, I gave it a 4. So that brings us to character relatability, and I thought it was a pretty relatable episode. Even Bud being scared about going bald and Kelly doing whatever she could to hammer at home. Peggy is probably the most unrelatable in the episode, but really it's just because she didn't have anything to relate to in this episode. Now, I haven't had any hair issues, thankfully. I've always believed that if I were to lose my hair, I would do it gracefully, but that's easy to say when you haven't started losing it, so I gave it a 4.5. So that brings us to the laugh counter. We have some pretty decent scores so far. Wouldn't take much to keep it in the top 3 tiers. And in this case, it got me 15 times, which puts the episode total at a 36, which puts it in the holy grail. For the series average, it moves up to a 33.5, which keeps it firmly in the I'd watch it again. And if you're ranking along with me, please drop your scores in the comments. I'd be really curious to see where we're the same and where we're different. Also the laugh counter. I'm always so curious to find out how many times people actually laughed. But thanks for listening and or watching. Check out the other Married with Children episodes that I've ranked, or any of the other sitcom or movie episodes that I've done. Remember to subscribe, comment, and like. For up-to-date rankings, you can do that on my website at therankpodcast.com, where you can also email me at john@therankpodcast.com. And if you really want to support the show, you can become a patron at patreon.com/therankpodcast. But I'll leave you with this. In the original script, Kelly was going to shave her head due to a misunderstanding. Why? Because a boy she liked said he preferred his girls bald.
Oh boy.
Yeah. Nope. Next thing we know, Al's asleep on the couch and Buck is Next thing we know, Al's asleep on the couch and Buck
He is malfunctioning.